It's our turn now,
Yeah,
Lois?
Daniel, go for it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to present at the conference. We are going to talk about youth participation and school democracy, and we are going to talk about the experience of school participatory budgeting in Arizona, a southwestern state in the US. There we go. So the first thing I would like to say is that we are in the social and cultural pedagogy program at Arizona State University, but we work together with the schools and districts in Arizona, several schools and districts, those are our partners, but also with the Center for the Future of Arizona and the Participatory Governance Initiative. The Center for the Future of Arizona is a nonprofit located here in Phoenix that focuses on different areas, but one of them is civic health. And when they look at civic health, they looked at connected communities and civic participation. And they understand civic health as the way communities are organized to define and address public problems. And they claim that by building stronger and more vibrant civic health across Arizona would create this civic health. So we work very closely with the Center for the Future of Arizona, those are our friends and partners, and also with the Participatory Governance Initiative at ASU that brings together academics, students, elected and non-elected, government officials, community members, and practitioners who are interested in participatory democracy and civic engagement. And the Participatory Governance Initiative pays particular attention to democratic innovations like participatory budgeting and now the topic of today, school participatory budgeting. So what is participatory budgeting? Some of you may be more knowledgeable about this than others, but in a nutshell, it's a democratic process in which community members directly decide how to spend a portion of a public budget. And it has some variations, but in general, the phases of the process tend to be similar. First, a group of community members design the process and the rules of the game. Then participants brainstorm ideas about projects that they would like to see to address problems in the community. Then in the next phase, these ideas are translated into viable proposals. And once these proposals are refined, then they are presented to a vote, and then everybody who participates has the chance to vote, and at the end, the winning projects are implemented. So there is an iterative process of ideation, deliberation, and decision-making. So to give you a little bit of history of participatory budgeting, it started in one city of 1.3 million people in southern Brazil called Porto Alegre in 1989, at the time that there was the fall of the Berlin Wall and many issues discussed about how democracy should look like. And 30 years later, by 2019, there were over 11,500 cities in all continents that are doing now participatory budgeting. It usually operates at the municipal level, at the city level, both in rural and urban areas, but as we will see today, there are also implementation at the other levels and institutions like schools. As I said before, PB, participatory budgeting PB, combines deliberative and direct democracy, and this is an interesting contribution of PB. And budgets are important because budgets are policies without rhetoric. It is said that if you want to look at the real priorities of any organization, be it a municipal government or an NGO, look at the vision and the mission, look at the statements, but also look at the budget. That's where you're going to see the real priorities of that particular organization. So among the things that the literature tells us in terms of the contributions of participatory budgeting is more transparency, more accountability, community building, and empowerment or agency, which is a key concept in social pedagogy. So the social pedagogical dimension that is clear also in participatory budgeting is what people call it in Porto Alegre, participatory budgeting as a school of citizenship of ordinary citizens. Is where ordinary citizens can learn democracy by doing democracy. Now, school participatory budgeting is a new trend, started a few years ago as a big as an implementation for many districts. There were some schools and districts doing it in the 90s, but without any continuity. And now we're going to see an expansion of participatory budgeting around the world. Probably the most interesting case is Portugal now, that has school PB in every school of Portugal, every school of the country, with I think it's €1 per student in every school. In Arizona, I will mention in a moment how it has been growing, but I would say that the school PB addresses at least 3 issues that we can see today. One is what is called the civic engagement gap, which in reality is a civic engagement opportunity gap. So some people have more opportunities to participate in civic engagement, to take leadership positions, etc. And we know that participation begets participation and creates what is called the Matthew effect, in which relates to the accumulation of inequalities over time. So school PB has the possibility to at least narrow this civic engagement gap and promotes agency, political efficacy, which is the feeling that you have that you can make a difference in politics, in civic life, and student voice. And for this reason, in Arizona, participatory budgeting, school participatory budgeting is usually implemented in low-income schools and neighborhoods. The second is an uncivil political discourse, and that we can see in when we look at Facebook or any social media, and extreme polarization. And school PB promotes dialogue and deliberation, collaboration and trust. And the third challenge is that the civic education is usually taught in a banking way, to use Freire's terminology, and school PB promotes experiential learning, project-based learning, and nurturing school community, because it involves the whole school community. So in Arizona, started in 2013 with a pilot project in the Bioscience High School in Phoenix. By 2016, the Phoenix High School District adopted it as a district policy, and incrementally has been growing from 5 schools to all 20 schools in Phoenix. And then there have been 14 additional schools in 3 other cities. So now we have 4 cities and 34 schools. And in fall 2020, we're going to have 1 more city joining, and there will be approximately 40,000 students involved, and it will include high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. So the Arizona School PB experiment has 5 main features. One is a pioneering project because it has been the first one in North America. The second is that it's very counterintuitive, because usually school PB comes after municipal PB, but in Arizona there is no really municipal PB, but the school PB came first. So it's unusual in the world system of participatory budgeting. The third is what I mentioned before. The third characteristic is that it's an incremental approach. started with one school, then 5, then 10, then 20, and then it is expanding organically. It didn't start top down from one day 400 schools that happens in other jurisdictions. The fourth characteristic is that it includes different levels. Usually, school PB involves mainly high schools, but we have high schools, middle schools, and now we are going to have elementary schools. And the fifth characteristic is a constant experimentation and variation. So we have different models in different schools we can talk about later on. And there are lots of experimentation all the time with different models. And I'm going to go towards the end now. So this is one quote. This is the last slide. One quote from one PB delegate in one of the schools saying, now I understand so much more about how our school relates to the district, how our funding and facilities improvements work, and how can I make a difference. And there is also a video, a 4-minute video on the experiment when we had 5 schools. I will send you the link to the short video, which is a 4-minute video. Thank you very much. And now I'll give the floor to Omar.
Hello, everybody. Let me just share my video really quickly and I'll get going. Okay. Hi. Does everybody see the share screen? Okay. So I'll get going. So my name is Omar Kaidan, and I used to be a graduate student at Arizona State University. I just graduated a few weeks ago, and I will present some results from my study about participants' perspectives of first-year participatory budgeting. My study was done in 2 junior high schools and focused on 3 main research questions. First one, how inclusive was the project based on the students' academic tracks and socio-demographics characteristics? 2, what were the impacts of the process on the steering committee students in terms of their knowledge, attitude, skills, and practices? And 3, to what extent have relationships within the school community between students and teachers changed? And the data for the study include observations I made when I attended the steering committee meetings, interviews and focus groups I conducted with the 9 steering committee members at the end of the process, close to voting day. And in addition, the students were asked to rank themselves pre-PB and post-PB for 40 indicators questionnaire on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. The questionnaire was organized into 4 categories: knowledge, attitudes, skills, and practices, which is known as the CASP. There's one major limitation that must be addressed before I move on. Due to the really small number of participants in my study, I had only 9 students. I couldn't conduct any valid statistical tests. Therefore, I only provided the average scores for the students' responses on the questionnaire, which you'll see in a second. And the case studies were completed at Randall and Kubiak, pseudonyms for 2 public junior high schools in a city in Arizona in the US, which implemented the school participatory budgeting process for the first time. If you wonder about the names, they were taken from the TV show Parker Lewis Can't Lose that was broadcasted in the early 90s. The 2 schools were selected by the school district for the process, shared similar characteristics. Both schools are located in the same region of the city, with about 900 with about 900 students each. Both schools have high percentage of low-income students, um, and both schools are considered to be low-achieving schools. And both schools have um, majority of Hispanic students, more than 50%, which is different from the city's general population, which is mostly white. Even though even though the two schools share similar characteristics and follow the same timeline for the process, each school did it a bit differently. The main difference was the student selection method for the steering committee. In Randall Junior High School, the teacher were asked to recruit students who would mostly benefit from participating in the steering committee, while in Kubiak, the students were self-selected. So basically, they volunteered to participate in the committee. It resulted in different composition of the steering committees in terms of ethnic diversity and gender. Randall's Randall's junior high school steering committee had overrepresentation of Hispanic and male students, while at Kubiak there was an overrepresentation of white students and female students. In terms of the learning and change, in order to evaluate the impact of the school PB process on the steering committee members, I analyzed data from the interviews and focus groups with the CAS questionnaire that each student filled at the end of the process. Scores from the questionnaire revealed that the average change for all four categories were positive, with um, and the two schools share similar results. The greatest change was in the knowledge and in the attitudes categories. The skills and practices showed the least amount of change. Generally, Randall students reported greater average change for all four categories compared to Kubiak students. This difference can be explained by the different selection method by the two schools I mentioned before. In the knowledge category, which had the greatest change, the students learned mostly about school and district regulations, about budget issues. They also learned, they also got to know students from other grade levels, and they learned about participatory democracy. In the attitudes category, the students reported that the process made them feel more confident that they can make a change in their school and more connected to their school community. They also believed that their voice was being heard and valued throughout the process. Interestingly, the students reported only slight changes in their respect for others and tolerance attitudes. It can be explained by the high pre-PB scores for those questions. So the pre-PB score was high, therefore the change was really small. Reported changes in the skills and practices categories were similar to each other and lower compared to the previous two categories. The main skills mentioned by the students were related to proposal development and to public speaking, as you can see here. The most significant indicator in the practices category was intention to vote in elections, or intention to vote in elections as soon as I am allowed to, since they were junior high students, so they have at least 5 more years till they can actually vote, but they intend to vote. On the other hand, responses to civic engagement indicators were less obvious. Although the students expressed intention to attend public meetings, they are less likely to join or volunteer with a community organization. My findings also indicated that the process made only minor changes in relationships within the school, be it between students or between teachers and students, with the exception of the steering committee members who had a central role in the process benefited from it as they got to know students from other grades. They told me that they made new friends. They developed a belief that their teachers trust them now more than before. And so they definitely benefited from the process in terms of relationships. And for conclusion, I would like to emphasize some key findings of my research. First of all, the research, the selection method of the students was significant to the demographics and the inclusivity of the steering committee. Self-selection method resulted in students who are already civically engaged and therefore were less impacted by the process. The teacher-appointed method favored male and marginalized students who supposedly would benefit more from participating in the steering committee. Secondly, my finding indicated that school PB supported student engagement and understanding of school and district decision making and regulations. It also taught the students about budget and was an opportunity for them to experience a big and complicated project. Additionally, throughout the process, the students have developed practical skills such as public speaking and proposal development. It also strengthened the students' self-efficacy in their ability to make a change and to believe that their voices are heard and valued. And finally, the voting phase of the process was a great success because it allowed the committee members to feel and express their ownership over the product. And they all were highly positive that they will vote when time comes. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Bartlett. I am currently an education policy evaluation PhD student at Arizona State University, and I'm going to bring a different approach to school participatory budgeting that we have tried just this past school year in a middle school in Mesa, Arizona. This was a study that was done with the partnerships that are shown across the top of the screen. And as Daniel had previously mentioned, the Center for the Future of Arizona, the Participatory Governance Initiative at Arizona State University, and the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Council. And my research is really centered in these three areas. So for PB, I draw on different forms of democracy: participatory, representative, and deliberative. I also draw upon civic engagement, and as Omar had referenced, the CASP, so the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills, and the practices that are needed to civically engage in one's community. And civic education, the 10 proven practices that have been put forth here in the US in 2 different reports. And to further define participatory democracy, it really draws from both deliberative and direct democracy. Direct democracy is more of the electoral engagement, and deliberative might be more of the community engagement, and bringing those together in a greater participatory lens. And civic engagement, again, is the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills, and the practices that one needs to civically engage within one's community. And that can span from everything from civil discourse to volunteerism to voting, having voice, and of course, the community participation in different initiatives. In terms of civic education, these are the two reports that we draw upon for the 10 proven practices that are outlined here. This first report was released in 2011 by the Civic Mission of Schools, and it really is focused on the classroom piece. So it's the history, the law, the democracy teachings that normally happen here in social studies classes, the discussion of current events, service learning opportunities, so bringing together the learning piece to go along with volunteerism in the community, the participation in extracurricular activities, school governance, like the student body governing boards, and of course the democratic simulation like kids voting. And just 2 years ago, this was the second report that was released that built upon all of those factors, and now includes school climate reform, so a lot of social justice that's happening in schools, social emotional learning, so those other intelligences that are needed to engage with others, action civics, so the greater action happening within the community, and media literacy in terms of fake news and what we're seeing today in mainstream media. We approached this study in an inclusivity lens, and this was done at Carson Junior High School. There were 4 factors that we wanted to really explore in terms of inclusivity. We wanted to have a mindful representation of students that served on the steering committee with a greater emphasis of including students with a documented disability, so special education students. We also wanted to have various opportunities for participation and deliberation school-wide. So normally in this process, you might have the steering committee really take hold of this, and maybe the students that are amongst the greater student body might hear a little bit about the different ideas, they might submit an idea and then the end vote, but there's not this long-term engagement throughout the school year of the process, and we really wanted to build on that. We wanted to measure, students' self-perception of how they felt in terms of being accepted within their school community and with others, their sense of belonging, how they would feel empowered after having the chance to make decisions within their school, and of course, how this could impact the greater school climate. And again, our focus was really amongst the special education students. The last inclusivity piece we wanted to bring to the table was a community vote. So instead of students being the only ones voting, we also wanted the teachers and staff at the school and parents. We had a parent night on the same day the students voted at school, and having the parents come out and vote and show their voice as well. This is the timeline that we followed this past school year at Carson Junior High in terms of our inclusivity project. In September, we went ahead and recruited and selected the steering committee. This was a quasi-model between the students being selected by teachers and also self-selecting to be part of the steering committee. We had about 34 students in the steering committee, and they were trained in the process in September. And in October, they went ahead and did a school-wide kickoff, informing the rest of the school body what the process was going to look like, what their role was, and how the school was going to be a part of that. And that was done in accordance with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, who's in charge of the elections in our Maricopa County. It's the greater Phoenix metro area and the outskirts, the largest county in Arizona. We went ahead and did the idea collection in October, and the school overall submitted 281 ideas. In November, the steering committee looked at those ideas and whittled them down to 21 based upon parameters that I will share shortly, and went ahead to do a school-wide awareness campaign. This included a lot of projects like photo voice, so taking pictures and sharing them out through presentations and on social media with other students, and creating artwork such as posters around the school to advertise those ideas. After that was done, we voted and had a primary vote, and that was done in rank order. So students were able to pick their top 3, and then the steering committee counted those primary results with help from math classes on campus. In January, we went ahead and took the results from the primary vote, and the student steering committee began a process of another awareness campaign around those final 5 ideas. And on the final vote, we went ahead and worked again with the county recorder's office, where they brought the ballots and machines in that are actually used in county elections here in Arizona for the students to kind of simulate what voting would really feel like based on the ideas they were voting on for their school. So here's some examples of the idea collection. Again, there was 281 ideas overall that were submitted school-wide. And if you look at the stars on the right-hand side, those are the parameters that the student steering committee had to decide upon. So they had to decide whether the idea broke any rules, whether it was a school rule or a policy or a district rule or policy or even state. They also had to look at the timeline if the project was going to be completed before the end of the school year, because it's really important that students, especially in a middle school where it was the 8th grade students leaving to go to high school the next year, that they kind of saw the fruits of their labor in a sense. The third parameter was the number of students, so benefiting the largest number of students. The fourth parameter is cost, so staying within the budget. And the last one, which was actually a new one the students came up with this year at Carson Junior High, was sustainability. So in terms of whatever they invested their money in, was it sustainable in terms of eco-sustainability, but also long-term sustainability amongst the student population. And this was the idea collection again of 281 ideas, whittled down to the 21 ideas for the primary vote. So we went ahead and did the primary vote also as a first time to replicate what a real election looks like. And so the students were able to vote on these 21 ideas in rank order for their top 3 favorites. These were the final 5 votes and the results. As you can see, the top one was better bell music. That's essentially music that plays in between classes. And because the school budget was a couple $1,000s, the bell music was kind of a drop in the bucket. So that one was automatically done and then moved to the school therapy dog. And that was the second winner that the students will be seeing this fall. And the students got to actually see some school therapy dogs come and visit campus to kind of see how that was going to feel or what opportunities they might have in terms of interacting with a therapy dog. Microwaves for student use was something that they wanted in the cafeteria, so students that didn't want to eat in the cafeteria could bring food from home to warm up. Bathroom improvements included new faucets and new mirrors and gaps between doorways, a privacy shield for that. And the last one is filtered water fountains. So there's already been 2 installed on campus from a previous PB iteration, but the students did want more because they are highly used. In this research, we really were kind of playing with all the tools in the sandbox. We did a mixed methods approach, and we took field note observations. So the research team and teachers, since a lot of the work was done within the social studies classrooms. Again, the students participated by submitting visual art and photo voice throughout the process. We also, as Omar had alluded to in the CASP survey, did that same survey, and we added school climate. So we did that amongst the steering committee and a randomized student population. We did interviews with the steering committee and parents, and then focus groups with teachers and administrators at the end of the process. Some research findings that are still a work in the making, since we hope to have a toolkit on how to have a greater inclusive model of PB. But gen ed students showed a higher increase in the knowledge indicators, while SPED students had a higher increase in the skill indicators on the CASP. There were also increases overall amongst all student groups in terms of decision making, a greater awareness of needs within the school and amongst peers, a greater understanding of what participatory democracy is and how it can be used to create and impact change, how to use their voice, and a shared ability to impact change. And all students did express a desire to continue making a difference in some way within their school and community. There are some quotes there at the bottom that were shared among students during the interviews, and a lot of them built upon self-confidence and an understanding of how to both engage participatory democracy-wise, but also just within their community and amongst their peers. We did see increases as well with student-to-student relationships and student-to-teacher relationships. Another large takeaway is that there are these concentric circles of participation you see in any type of electoral engagement, legislative engagement, and within other PB models. And there's 3 concentric circles of participation. The third one is really the largest outskirt in terms of people just observing the process from afar and then showing up to vote. And the second concentric circle builds on that by adding in maybe there's a little bit of determining what some of that process looks like. Maybe there's a little bit of say in creating that process, and the participants also deliberate in that process. And the middle section, which really is the student steering committee, they do all of the above and then add on to that the presentation experiences, the facilitation experiences, and also, sorry, it's blocking, the organization experiences. For this, what we did was we essentially got rid of this third concentric circle because we did offer so many opportunities for students on campus to deliberate within social studies classes. We also had students tabling during lunchtime, so very much like any legislative type of election cycle where you have people tabling and sharing ideas. The student steering committee did that as well. The greater student body also had a say in determining and creating this process in terms of the primary vote before the final vote. So we really did get this third eccentric circle eliminated during this inclusive process. And that's just a final picture of our student steering committee on stage with the county recorder, Adrian Fontes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all 3 of you. That was really interesting.